The Crescent Hollow Town courtroom was packed that morning, but the atmosphere was eerily silent. No rustling of papers, no murmured exchanges. Only the faint hum of the old ceiling lights echoed in the heavy anticipation. The large wooden doors creaked open. Every gaze immediately turned toward the entrance. A small boy with soft blonde hair stepped in. Evan Miller, 6 years old, clutching tightly to a dark brown leash. At the other end of the leash was Blaze, a sturdy golden Labrador rescue dog, a faint long scar still visible along his flank. Evan didn't lift his head. Every step he took was careful, almost measured in perfect rhythm, with Blaze's stride. Sunlight poured through the tall, stained glass windows, casting a soft golden sheen over the two small figures crossing the vast room. Blaze moved slowly, his body alert but calm. His eyes scanned every corner, every face in the room, as if shielding his young master from invisible threats. The boy and the dog, a silent yet unwavering bond. Evan had not uttered a word since the day the incident happened at the park. That day, amid the innocent laughter of children, Evan and his friends had vanished without a trace. When the police found him, he was alone, huddled beneath a large tree, his eyes vacant and an absolute silence draped around his fragile heart. The people of Crescent Hollow had been stunned, whispering fragmented stories to one another. A mysterious disappearance, a child who survived but spoke no words, shed no tears, and smiled no more. Evan had become a heartbreaking symbol of fear and loss that the small town had never known before. Beside him, Blaze was more than just a rescue. Blaze was a shield, a fragile bridge linking Evan to the world outside. In the heavy air of the courtroom, Judge Nora Caldwell sat atop the high bench, her expression stern, yet filled with understanding. She knew the answers to the mystery could be locked inside that small heart, and only Blaze might guide the boy through his fear. Evan reached the witness stand. Blaze lay down at his feet, his deep brown eyes never leaving the boy. No one rushed him. No one pressed. Everyone simply waited for a flicker of hope, a sign even the smallest, that Evan might find his voice again. And with it, the truth would slowly surface like the first glimmer of light, breaking through a tunnel too long shrouded in darkness. The air in the Crescent Hollow courtroom grew thick, as if even breathing was suspended. Evan Miller, with Blaze lying at his feet, sat silently on the witness chair. A small, frail boy, his hands gripping the armrest so tightly they turned pale. All eyes were on him, waiting, hoping for a miracle. At the defense table, Cole Harmon sat still, his face calm. A man in his 40s with neatly cropped hair and a gray shirt showed no visible sign of worry. His attorneys whispered quickly, preparing for the worst. Though they knew that everything in this case rested on fragile, incomplete pieces, the evidence against Cole was weak. A similar vehicle was spotted near the park, a few uncertain testimonies, and the fact that he had once worked temporarily near the area. No direct witnesses and no DNA traces, only a community's fear desperate for someone to blame. And Judge Nora Caldwell understood that Prosecutor Melissa Grant took a deep breath and approached the stand. "Evan," she said gently, her voice like a soft breeze, "if you recognize someone who hurt you or your friends, could you point to them for us? You don't have to speak, just a gesture is enough." Evan remained still. He seemed not to hear, or perhaps the world around him was still too foreign, too dangerous to step into. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes. Not a sound. The light in the courtroom seemed to dim, each tick of the clock pounding against the heavy air. And then very slowly, Evan lifted his left hand palm, gently resting on his thigh, his index finger curling and uncurling, a small signal, a technique he had practiced for months with his therapists, a sign that something was wrong. Almost at the same moment, Blaze shifted his posture. The once calm Labrador sprang up, ears perked high, muscles taut. A low growl rumbled from Blaze's chest, resonating across the room. Everyone expecting Blaze to move toward Cole Harmon instinctively turned their heads to follow the dog's gaze. But Blaze wasn't looking at the defendant. His eyes locked onto a different corner of the courtroom, the row reserved for courthouse security personnel. A man sat at the end of the row. Marcus Vane. He wore a security uniform bearing the Crescent Hollow badge, and his demeanor relaxed like that of a seasoned staff member. But when Blaze's sharp gaze fixed on him, Marcus stiffened slightly. Blaze growled louder, the fur along his neck, bristling his stance, half shielding Evan. The entire courtroom seemed frozen. Marcus forced an awkward smile, scratching the back of his neck, but the unease on his face was evident. His eyes blinked rapidly and his hands unconsciously tightened around his thighs. Judge Caldwell slammed her gavel hard. Order in the court. She turned sharply to the security team, her voice firm. Escort that officer Marcus Vane to the security screening room immediately. Several officers moved toward him. Marcus stood quickly, raising his hands to show he was cooperating, but there was a flicker of restlessness, of nervousness in his eyes. Before being led away, he glanced back toward Evan, a flash of resentment in his stare before it was masked under a false calm. Blaze growled once more, a deep, thunderous sound like distant storm clouds. Outside the courtroom, Judge Caldwell conferred urgently with Prosecutor Melissa Grant and Agent Clara Reyes, the newly assigned federal investigator. Something's wrong, Clara said quickly, a slim file in her hand. Marcus Vane worked at Crescent Hollow Park about 6 months ago, around the time the children disappeared. Judge Caldwell's fingers tightened slightly on the hem of her robe, her gaze hardening. Run a full background check, employment records, history, any possible links between Vane and suspicious locations? Melissa Grant nodded. And have Evan questioned again, but this time only Blaze and a trauma therapist present. No one else. She cast a glance at Evan, the boy sitting silently in the hallway, Blaze at his side like an inseparable shadow. At that moment, the whole town of Crescent Hollow seemed to hold its breath. Not just from shock, but because for the first time in months of silence, there was real hope that the truth might finally surface, and it wouldn't come from a word. It would come from a growl and the unyielding loyalty of a scarred but steadfast dog. That day, Crescent Hollow was wrapped in the gentle colors of spring Willow Grove Park. The green heart of the town was filled with laughter, the songs of birds, and the rustling of leaves under soft breezes. It was just an ordinary Sunday, a day no one knew would change Evan Miller's life forever. Across the wide lawn, Evan and his 3 best friends, Mason, Tyler, and Jack, were running around the playground. Evan's bright yellow t-shirt stood out against the sea of green like a tiny moving sunbeam. The boys chased each other, laughter echoing through the park, innocent and unsuspecting of the dangers lurking beyond their small world. No one noticed when a man approached. He wore a dark blue security uniform and a badge from a well-known local private security company. His smile was friendly. In his hand, he carried a large bag filled with toys that shimmered with blinking lights. Remote-controlled cars, miniature helicopters, glowing balls. "Hey there, kids," the man said warmly, setting the bag down on the grass. "Want to try out some new toys? They're free today." Mason and Tyler ran over eagerly, their eyes sparkling with excitement. Jack hesitated for a moment, but curiosity soon pulled him in too. Only Evan stood frozen. His mother's warning rang clearly in his mind. If a stranger approaches you, no matter if they're in uniform or seem nice, you don't go near. You find an adult immediately. Evan's small hand gripped the hem of his shirt tightly, his heart pounding in his chest. There was something about the man's smile, too easy, too ready, that made Evan's skin crawl. The man knelt and pulled out a red remote-controlled car, pushing it gently toward Evan. "And you, little guy," he coaxed, his eyes carefully watching Evan's reaction. Evan took a step back. The man reached out as if merely offering the toy, but as his fingers brushed Evan's wrist, the boy felt it clearly. It wasn't a casual touch, but a grip of control. Instinct flared. Evan broke free, spun around, and started running. No crying, no screaming. Only the sound of his small sneakers pounding against the soft grass. He sprinted across the lawn, weaving through clusters of adults resting on picnic blankets. Behind him, the man's voice called out, "Hey, kid, wait a second. It's just a gift." Evan didn't look back. The only way out was a narrow trail leading to the main road. Across it lay the shaded area for joggers. Evan ran like a tiny gust of wind, his sneakers scraping the gravel path. As he rounded a large tree, Evan collided headfirst into a tall jogger. The impact sent them both stumbling. "Whoa, easy there, buddy," the jogger said, kneeling to steady the breathless child. He was in his early 30s, wearing a tank top and athletic shorts, and he looked down at the trembling boy. Evan looked up, his face pale, his lips tightly pressed together. He couldn't form a word, but his wide eyes were filled with terror. The jogger followed Evan's pointed finger toward the distant park area, where a man in a security uniform lurked, scanning the crowd. A stranger, a uniform, a panicked child. No more proof is needed. The jogger, whose name was Adam Keller, pulled his phone from his pocket and immediately dialed 911. "I'm at Willow Grove Park," he said briskly. "A child just ran up to me. Looks terrified. Possible attempted child abduction." Evan crouched on the curb, arms wrapped tightly around his knees, his gaze locked onto the park. Within minutes, a patrol car's siren pierced the afternoon air. But by the time the officers arrived, the park had already settled back into its peaceful facade. There was no sign of the toy bag, no trace of the man in the dark blue uniform. And worse, Mason Tyler and Jack Evans' three friends had vanished from the park. Their shadows, their laughter, all had evaporated like smoke into the beautiful afternoon. Only Evan remained. But from that moment on, he would not utter another word. He simply clutched the hem of his shirt, sitting silently by the roadside, staring unblinkingly at the spot where he had last seen his friends. At the police station, Evan was brought in along with his parents. Officers gently tried to coax him and asked him soft questions, but Evan only bowed his head, his eyes distant. Not a single sound escaped his small lips. The silence weighed heavier than any answer. An invisible accusation, a scar too deep to erase. That day, Crescent Hollow changed from a peaceful town into a place burdened with suspicion and fear. Search parties were organized. Security cameras in the area were reviewed. A few blurry images emerged. A shadowy figure in a dark uniform carrying a large bag of toys. But the face was unclear. No license plate could be identified. The only solid leads are Adam Keller, the man who called the police in Evan's fragmentary gestures. The ghost of that day haunted all of Crescent Hollow, and Evan, with his silent, haunted eyes, became the lone witness to something he was far too young to put into words. Clara, around 38, with neatly cropped black hair, sharp eyes, and a steady voice, was known for never missing a detail. She had brought dozens of missing children home from seemingly impossible situations. Standing at the head of the meeting room, Clara opened with unwavering resolve. "We've been looking in the wrong direction from the start. Now we go back all the way to the smallest details." The next day, a special hearing was held at the town hall. Cole Harmon, the man who had been wrongfully accused, stood before the court with his lawyer at his side, his face bearing the fatigue of months of imprisonment, but his eyes still shining with hope. The judge lightly tapped the gavel. "Based on newly presented evidence, including DNA witness testimonies and independent investigative findings, the court declares Mr. Cole Harmon not guilty and hereby dismisses all charges. You are free to go immediately." An emotional wave swept through the courtroom. Cole simply nodded. He couldn't speak, but tears glistened in his eyes. He had regained not only his freedom, but also the honor that had been unjustly stripped away. Outside the courthouse, a different scene was unfolding. The lawn behind the town hall was filled with the sound of children's laughter. A small event was held as a token of gratitude to the community for their patience and collective efforts during the investigation. Evan Miller, the boy who had lived in complete silence since the tragic day, sat on the grass beside Blaze. The boy wore a sky blue t-shirt and his brown hair tousled under the sunlight. Blaze, the golden Labrador, lay next to him, his tail gently wagging in the breeze. A ball rolled toward Evan. Another boy, Mason, a former neighborhood friend, ran up grinning brightly. "Hey, Evan, pass the ball." The group of kids paused, eyes full of hopeful anticipation. Evan stared at the ball, then looked up. His gaze hesitated for a moment, as if battling an invisible wall inside him. Blaze, lying beside him, lightly nudged Evan's leg with his nose, a silent, gentle reminder. "You are safe now." Evan took a deep breath, then with a soft but clear voice he said, "Here it comes." He gave the ball a light push, sending it rolling toward Mason. The silence shattered into cheers. The kids rushed over laughing, patting Evan's shoulders, pulling him into the game. Blaze remained where he was, his warm brown eyes following Evan's every move, not interfering, not intruding, only quietly guarding like a silent protector. That scene, observed from a distance by Clara Reyes, softened her heart. An hour later, when the kids were exhausted and collapsed onto the grass, Evan nestled his head against Blaze's side, his small hand gently stroking the soft golden fur. The whispers shared between the boy and the dog didn't need to be understood by anyone else. They were simply signs of healing. In the months to come, Evan would continue therapy, learning to walk beyond his trauma. The deepest wounds need time to scar over. But today, just today, the boy had smiled, spoken, and played like any other child. And Blaze's alert, upright ears, and along with his tail softly wagging under the sunset, reminded everyone, safety is real. Justice has been served, and hope will never die. The story of Evan Blaze and the children of Crescent Hollow comes to a close today, but its echoes will remain in our hearts. It is a story of courage, of a rescue dog's extraordinary instinct, and of the tiny light that never fades, even in the darkest hours. Thank you for staying with us throughout this emotional journey. Thank you for listening, understanding, and believing that every life, every child, and every moment of love is worth protecting until the very end. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel to continue this journey with us. Every subscription, every like, and every share is a huge encouragement, allowing us to bring you more stories of hope, resilience, and truth. Please continue to believe in kindness, compassion, and the immeasurable power of hope. Once again, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We look forward to seeing you in the next stories where light will always find its way through the darkness.